And I want to say welcome to a special lunch edition of Preservation North Carolina Shelter Series. I'm Julianne Patterson, and I'm the new outreach manager at PNC. And we started this virtual series about places that matter last year and learned that these virtual events created access to connect with more of you across the state. So we're sticking with them. You can visit our website for an upcoming list of events, and you can also watch recordings of previous programs. If you have suggestions for future topics, or if you're interested in presenting, I'd love to talk with you and hear any and all ideas. So feel free to get in touch with me. We do love that we can present the Shelter Series to you free of charge, but we're also always grateful for your continued support of our programming. If you're enjoying this series, please consider a gift or a sponsorship to help us keep it going. There's a giving link in the survey that will appear at the end of the program, and you can also visit our website to make a donation later. This afternoon, we're excited to present Heights House, or the building formerly known as Montfort Hall. And our guests are Sarah and Jeff Shepard, who have lived in the Boylan Heights neighborhood where Montfort Hall resides for the past decade, and are the visionaries behind what is now Heights House. After walking by the house almost daily for years, thinking, what if, Sarah evolved her dream into a reality. After acquiring the property in 2018, it took over 8 months to rezone for commercial use. Working alongside Mauer Architecture, Greg Paul Builders, and Brian Costello Design, renovations on the historic property began in early 2019, and then Heights House made its debut in May 2021 as a 9-room boutique hotel and venue. They still live a few blocks from the property with their 1.5-year-old daughter, Clark, a Great Pyrenees named Ophelia, and baby number 2 just weeks away. Preservation North Carolina's president and CEO, Myrick Howard, is also joining us to share some history about PNC's role in the preservation and protection of Montfort Hall. Before I turn it over to Sarah and Jeff, I just want to quickly go over a few Zoom housekeeping items for those of you who might be new to the Shelter Series. Although everyone is pretty used to Zoom these days, but if you are having technical issues, please let me know just by typing into the chat, and I'll try my best to help you. I'll also moderate all questions at the end of the presentations, but feel free to ask questions anytime using the Q&A box. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and thanks to Sarah and Jeff and Myrick. And Sarah and Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Awesome, thanks. Can you hear us?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right, let's see if we can get this up and running.
All right.
Can you see it? Excellent.
Okay. Well, we're very excited that Preservation NC asked us to do this. It's very exciting. I hope it's a very exciting hour for you.
Yeah, hopefully it's very informative. You know, we really appreciate everybody that's able to tune in with us throughout lunch, and we'll try and keep this quick. We're known to talk a lot. We did a lot of research on the house, both before buying it and afterwards, and we really obviously love this property so much, and we're just really excited to be able to share a little bit of the history with you. And I guess we should start with ourselves. So Sarah, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I know you already heard a little bit about us, but yeah, we have lived in the Boylan Heights neighborhood where Montfort Hall / Heights House is. But, you know, Jeff still works full time. I run pretty much, I'm the general manager now of Heights House. But it was a long dream in the making. You know, I think I wrote a business plan 6-7 years ago. And there was a lot of steps we had to take to make this a reality and get to renovation, purchase it, rezone it, get to renovation. So it was a lot of hard work, but it paid off. And now we're excited that the community and visitors from all over can now travel and visit this amazing property. All right, so we're going to start with history about the house. So almost all that we know about the property, the architect, the Boylans, who is the family who built it, is thanks to a man named William Bushong. It can kind of get confusing because there's a lot of Williams in the history of the property, but William Bushong was he was attending App State with a master's in history, and in 1979 he wrote his thesis on the history of the house and the architect William Percival. He actually later went on to become the historian of the White House Historical Association. But this thesis has tons of information about the house, and it's how we learn a great deal about it. And we're going to share most of the details that we're sharing today is from that. And you can actually read it, read the thesis on jstor.org. So it's a really interesting, it's probably like 100 and some pages, and there's old photos and pictures. So we're really grateful that we had that resource.
Yep. So one of the cool things that we found along the way is this old map of Raleigh that I had seen, plastered around downtown. A lot of historic buildings love to, have historic hanging or pictures hanging in there. And one thing that I never noticed is that the building Montfort Hall is actually in the very bottom. It is, right above the Raleigh image or the Raleigh text at the bottom. And it actually showed us a little bit of the detail about the house as it used to exist way back when this drawing was commissioned. So that was really nice. Just a little bit of history about the house. So the house was actually commissioned in 1858 by William Montfort Boylan. And he was guided by a British architect, William Percival, like Sarah mentioned, lots of Williams. Just a little bit about kind of the style of the house. So it is an Italianate style home. It is similar to Victorian, but it has a little bit less of kind of those ornate details. But it is a style that's derived by kind of medieval Italian villas and farmhouses. A lot of symmetry on the exterior and then a lot of curves on the interior, which is really cool. The house was completed in 1860, and it sits on what is now the highest point of the historic Boylan Heights neighborhood, and it is obviously quite close proximity to downtown Raleigh. It is one of the few pre-Civil War era houses in the area, and we're very happy that we were able to keep it and restore it. And it is not only sitting in the historic district of Boylan Heights, but it is also a national and Raleigh historic landmark, as well as having covenants by Preservation North Carolina, which is where we are right now. One of the really kind of fun facts that we like to mention about this house, and we can go into it a little bit more in detail later, is that there's train tracks. You can see the train tracks, the Boylan Bridge. And actually, I don't know if that's not the Boylan Bridge there, I don't believe. But so this house actually used to have a private train car that he was able to access from his property, and was able to take the train car into town or go travel elsewhere as needed. The family is deeply tied into the railroad system of Raleigh. Just one of the really kind of interesting bits about the house as well is, so on the house itself, there's a cornerstone. And so the cornerstone, just a little bit of history about that, is they would actually set the cornerstone as the reference point for the entire rest of the building of the house. But it has in it, and so we have the original cornerstone still on the house, and it has etched into it both the name of the architect of the house, which was William Percival, and the house builders, Thomas Briggs and James Dodd, as well as William Montfort Boylan's name as it was commissioned for him. So William Montfort Boylan, just a little bit of history about him. He was actually, so he was the son of William Boylan, and William Boylan, the senior, was very well known, well respected around town as a businessman. He was involved in the Raleigh newspaper as well as the railroad system, like I mentioned. His son was a little bit more eclectic than he was, not quite as interested in business and more interested in the pleasures the pleasures that life can offer. He loved hunting. He loved entertaining guests, which is actually one of the things that, why the house spoke to us, I think, so much for what we wanted to do with it, was that the house was built to have people come and stay there and, be able to entertain guests. And it is really that grand feeling of the house that really lends itself to that. Do you want to, anything else for that?
No, yeah, that was great. We could talk a lot more. I'm trying to like.
We've gone over on this presentation before, so we're going to try and we'll try and cut it down as much as we can.
So these two photos are two of the oldest photos we have of the house. And you know, one of the things that the thesis made a really good point is it's really difficult to verify the original appearance of the interior because the home has undergone so many different extensive alterations over the last 165 years. But I love these images because you can really see the exposed brick and what we do have some drawings we'll show next, but yeah, it went through a lot of different changes. We're only the 10th owners, but and it's mostly been residential, but it was a church as well in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Just to like a little bit of details about the past owners. The Boylan family, they had it until 1904 is when William Montfort Boylan vacated the house. He sold it to the Greater Raleigh Land Company, along with its lands of $48,000. And they subdivided the land, and that's what started the Boylan Heights neighborhood. And a lot of the streets are named after the Boylan family.
One of the fun, like kind of little interesting information about the streets, though, is that because it wasn't actually the Boylan family that was naming the streets, it was the Greater Raleigh Land Company. They took a lot of the family names, and they happened to have misspelled either out of confusion or intention or what it may have been. But you'll even notice that there's Montfort Street here, which is the incorrect spelling there. Kinsey Street, McCulloch Street. There's a lot of streets that are named after the Boylan family but are actually incorrectly spelled. So Sarah mentioned that there were some drawings. These drawings were actually done by a student of NC State in the 1960s, but they did the best that they were able to do through research to do these architectural drawings that would actually detail what the house would have looked like in its original state. As Sarah mentioned, it was a single-family residence, a quite grand single-family residence. And it stayed that way for almost its entire life. One of the kind of key changes to the house over the time, and we were talking to Myrick about this earlier actually, is the Cabanis family purchased the house in 1911, and they did an extensive renovation to the house, and they did some good things, some bad things, and it really kind of changed the exterior feeling away from an Italianate style villa.
We have some photos we'll show you. Yeah,
we'll show more photos along the way. The other kind of major thing that happened to the house was when the Coburn, well, there's two more that we'll speak about. The Coburn family, when they owned it, they lived in it for actually quite a long time. However, towards the end of it, they had vacated the property, and they had, the house as it was sat vacant started to get vandalized. And so they went through and took a lot of the original chandeliers, the original fireplace mantelpieces from the house to protect them. And so unfortunately, some of the original pieces of the house that we've been either looking for to draw inspiration from or to use, we just don't have access to at the moment. And then the last thing that we, not the last thing, but kind of the last major change that the house had from what it originally was in the 1950s. As Sarah mentioned, the Boylan Heights Baptist Church was the tenant of the house, and they were using it for almost 30 years, I think it was 25 years, as their place of worship. And they really utilized the house to kind of facilitate the growth that they were experiencing, and they kind of modified the house in that way as well. So we have pictures on our website, I believe. I don't think we have them in the presentation, but you can actually see it was about a it was probably like almost a 15-foot addition that they did off the front of the house. There's a photo. Okay, great. So you'll see the photo later. But so you actually used to be able to walk through the windows in the front of the house, like that second floor window that's above the main entrance. You could step through that and enter another room that no longer exists there now. So this is the original floor plans of the house, at least as they could best guess. Like we mentioned, some of the details of the house were kind of hard to maintain throughout the years, but this was something that was really useful to us, and really, like, we could verify some of this as we were doing the renovation, and we could see kind of, where the original beams were going throughout the house, the walls, the supporting loads, things like that. So it was nice to be able to reference some of these and really be able to tell, what was original and what was not original. One thing, I don't know if you can read the lettering on this, but one thing that's kind of unique to these houses that are so old is the fact that there was no kitchen on site. So kitchens, obviously, back in the day, were a lot more prone to fire. And so there was actually a house behind Montfort Hall, which still exists and is still it's a single family home now. But that house used to be the kitchen for Montfort Hall. And then what they would do is, in the basement of Montfort Hall, there was a warming kitchen. So they would prepare all the food over in the kitchen, and then they would bring it into the basement, keep it warm until it was ready to be served. And there was a really cool ship's ladder that came from the basement to a kind of direct access to the dining room. And then there was also a dumbwaiter that was able to help get the food up there, because the ship's ladder is quite steep. And the ship's ladder was actually something that was a fun piece that we were able to bring back because of all of the architectural history that we had of the house, to kind of to showcase where things used to be. We could see, on the actual wall, you could see the indentation of where there was a stairwell going up. So it was really exciting to be able to see that.
And the house was also one of the first structures in Raleigh to have gas lighting, indoor plumbing, and a water closet. So I always think that's a really fun fact. And then you'll see the now floor plans and a little bit later, but just so you could know, we've actually kept, the front 4 rooms of the house where you see dining room, drawing room, library, and parlor. We have not changed that at all. And those are the now same uses that we use, same use of the rooms that we're using now. Okay, so I put these 4 photos together because we wanted to just talk a little bit about William Percival, who was the English architect who did this house. And there's actually, there's not a lot known about him. Even in William Bushlong's thesis, he states that there just aren't that many records about him. He was only in North Carolina for 2 years, and he did a lot actually while he was here. One of the other buildings he did at the same time that he was building Montfort Hall was the barracks in Tarboro, North Carolina. It's very similar to Montfort Hall. It's often referenced as the sister house. And we had the chance to go visit it and see all the similarities. There's things that, we're missing in Montfort Hall, but we're in the barracks, so we could take notes from that. And so it was very interesting. So this is the barracks, which is in Tarboro. And like I mentioned, they did this at the exact same time. You can see so many similarities. The exterior, a stained glass rotunda, the flooring. It is a little more modest, I'd say. It doesn't have, the sandstone detail on the outside. Montfort Hall does.
It didn't have the plumbing system.
And they did the added columns. There was a massive fire there in 2016 on the back part of it. It's currently under restoration as a private residence, but I think that was very cool to have that.
Yeah, so one of the things that if any of you have visited the Raleigh State Capitol, one of the things that are very similar between the State Capitol and Montfort Hall is this rotunda area with the kind of cupola and that stained glass monument that's there. And you can definitely notice a lot of the similarities. And it's actually because, so right around the time that William Percival was enlisted as the architect for this house, he was also doing a renovation to the State Capitol to bring a plumbing system into the State Capitol. And so he took a lot of the inspiration from this particular part of the building and brought it into this this homestead that he was building for William Montfort Boylan. And I really just love, like, you know, the similarities that you can see, the curvature, some of the molding, the details around. In this one, you can't see it, but the arches over the doorways that are, you know, extending from that rotunda area. It's really just nice to be able to see the similarities there, and kind of fun to see where the inspiration for Montfort Hall came, and as well as the barracks. The barracks had this as well. So, you know, Sarah mentioned that William Percival did a lot in his short time in Raleigh, and they were, all of them completed just within a few years of each other. Some of them are no longer standing, unfortunately. However, there are a few that are still remaining, one of which is the First Baptist Church. And so you can still see that on Salisbury Street if you happen to be going down there. And it's just really nice to be able to see that it is, you know, it is still intact largely from what it was originally designed as. And then we'll show you another one here, which is the Tucker House. This was one of the ones that was actually demolished. This one was demolished in 1968. However, you can see again, this is another grand villa that he had built. However, so the house itself was demolished, but the carriage house of the R.S. Tucker House actually still does remain, and it was renovated and is in the home of Arts Together, which is on St. Mary's Street in Raleigh. Yeah, so we're just gonna go, we're gonna go through some of the older photos that we have of the house. So this is the early 1950s when the Coburn family owned it. Like I mentioned, when they owned it, they did, towards the end of it, when they did vacate the property, they took a couple of the pieces out of it. However, we were able to reach out to the Coburn family and we're actually able to go through some of their personal collection of photos to kind of see all the kind of unique things that they used the house for. One of the things that I loved about it was the amount of livestock that they had on the property. They had horses. They had a pig. Was it a pig? It was pig and goats that they would let go in the house as well. And it was very, very nice of them to share. And it also allowed us to kind of see some of the rare interior photos of the house.
We don't have a lot of photos of the inside. And so they shared some with us, which was really neat to see. And they actually called the house Coburnsville.
Yep.
And they, you know, besides the Boylan family, and then we'll talk about the Jadwick family, they owned it for probably the next longest. So
yeah,
you know,
quite a significant period of time, 1918 to 1953. So
these are the photos of, you know, we've mentioned that it was a Baptist church during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So these are some photos. We do have a few, actually we have quite a few of the interior of the church. So they actually covered the open, what is that called? The
rotunda.
Rotunda. You can see on the right photo to make more space, and actually painted the stained glass cupola. So they were pretty dramatic changes, but they were things that the next family who owned it, the Jadwick family, were able to get back to what it originally was. They also knocked down a lot of walls.
I mean, they used it really to serve their purpose, yeah, which was, you know, to be able to house large, you know, groups of individuals for worship or for, you know, kind of schooling. And you know, a normal home doesn't really lend itself to that. So they did what they could to make the best space of the use. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best for the house, but you know, the Jadwick family, when they purchased the house, really you know, kind of took it back to, or started taking it back to what it originally was.
Yes, so the Jadwick restoration, which they purchased it from the church in 1979. These photos are actually, most of the old photos I should have mentioned are courtesy of the State Archives. The Jadwicks did an exceptional renovation. I mean, you can see restoration. You can see from the photos what kind of state it was in, and they really took it back to how it was originally built and, you know, completed in 1860. So we have a lot of thanking to do to them. And so, yeah, this is what the house looked like in 2018 when we were fortunate to be the next owners. No one had occupied it since about 2014.
I love, you know, I definitely learned a lot about architecture while we were going through this process. And, you know, one of the things that we often get asked about, you know, an old building like this is, well, like, you know, what kind of condition was it in? Like, what kind of shape, you know, how's the foundation? You know, there's all kinds of red flags when you're going through and looking at these new homes. And we were definitely cognizant of them and had, you know, a lot of people come and take a look at it and give us opinions. But really, one of the things that stood out to me was, you know, you've got these brick walls. And one thing that I think is very unique to this house is that the brick walls actually extend all the way into the interior of the house. A lot of the interior walls are also brick. And not only are they brick, but they're quite significant, up to 21 inches thick of brick, which provides a lot of insulation for the house. It also just provides a rock solid foundation for the house as well. So really, I think that's one of the key things that kept the house, you know, in such great shape. And then just, you know, kind of again on the architecture side, Sarah mentioned that the house has sandstone. So if you see around the windows and around the doors, the arches, the pink in these photos, that's actually sandstone. And it was because Percival wanted to utilize building materials that were local and locally sourced. And so he used sandstone to ornament the exterior of the property. Obviously, there's heart pine flooring on the interior, which we were so happy to be able to bring back to life, and it's really just, it's beautiful. Our flooring guys, they had their work cut out for them when they were doing the work. But then, you know, walnut for the doors, you know, stair rails, and the balustrades. Yeah. This is something that Preservation NC has a lot of excitement about right here, these two photos. So on the left side, you can actually see the plaster of the, I guess, the exterior of the interior dome. So this is what the dome looks like from the attic view right there. And then the original copper cistern. So like Sarah mentioned, this was one of the, actually, I think it was the first house in Raleigh, the first private residence in Raleigh to have plumbing. And so it was done by this giant copper cistern, which still is in the attic today, which is really just kind of cool to see, and you know, really, you know, uses a lot of ingenuity in terms of getting things done.
So when we got the house, the first thing we knew we needed to do was get a new roof on there. There was a lot of water damage inside. It was in really rough shape. So it was the first thing we tackled actually when we were in the process of rezoning the property, because you can do repairs, you know, on anything dependent on whatever it's rezoned. So we did that first, and we put on a new copper roof. So we wanted to make sure that we hopefully didn't have to worry about it in our lifetime, and hopefully the next people don't have to worry about it. We also did have to rebuild some of the chimneys, which you can see there. So they did a great job, you know, keeping the details the same and just rebuilding them. And there's a few more photos of the eaves.
Yep, eaves.
of the eaves that they had to rebuild as well, and the chimneys and the roof.
Yeah, so this is an interior photo. You can see that the flooring in this photo is not original. But one of the cool things that is original are these the capitals on top of the columns that are in the entryway when you first walk in. And again, kind of playing to the local feeling of this building. So that it's a plaster capital, or they're plaster capitals. But they have local animals on there. So there's squirrels and birds and acorns, which is just really fun to see. Minus the yeah, this is the close-up. Minus the fact that you can also see that some of the squirrels are missing tails, and some of the birds are missing wings. And
we actually didn't fix those. I just felt like they.
It's nice. They show the wear. They show the wear of the house. They show that they are old. They are really kind of unique to the house, and I think they add character to the house.
These are just some more photos of the house when we got our hands on it in 2018.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, again, I spoke about the really thick walls. Well, there is a small gap. I think it's like a 4 or 5 inch gap between the walls. And so what that allowed them to do is actually have pocket doors as well as pocket shutters on the windows. These windows don't have the pocket shutters, but you can see the pocket doors right here that actually they function pretty well, all things considered. So that was, it's really nice that you can take the rooms and you can kind of close them off if somebody needs a more private area, but you can also open it up and make it feel like one large room. This is the drawing room, as well as the parlor is closed off that you can see on those doors right there.
So yeah, really quickly, this is just the upstairs. Obviously that iron railing is not original. It used to be wood. So we'll show you a photo. We replaced it with walnut to match the original balusters.
Yeah. So the railing.
Sorry, I am 8.5 months pregnant, so my brain is not working all the time.
So the railing is still original on the main staircase there. And so what we were able to do is we took cues from that railing and kind of just made a more compliant, taller version of them to go around the rotunda to make sure it was safe, but
and
also.
And all of these photos are obviously from the renovation that the Jadwicks did in the late 70s, early 80s. And that's just looking down. We already saw the stained glass. And this is just the back, the main staircase and some niches.
This is the back entrance area right here. So what you have here is access all the way to the front of the house from the back, as well as the secondary access to the upstairs through the service stairs. So one of the things that we often get asked about the house and about the renovation is related to the color of the exterior of the house. And we tried as hard as we possibly could. We tried every possible combination of things to get the house back to brick. It was originally a brick structure.
Unpainted.
Unpainted brick structure, and we wanted to get it back to that. However, we found that we couldn't get the paint off without compromising the structure of the brick underneath it and the integrity of the brick. So what we ended up doing was we added a layer of primer, and then we ended up with kind of the darker color that you'll see in one of the future pictures.
And this is just during renovations. This is now our honeymoon suite, one of our biggest rooms. That's of course during renovations. This is during renovations.
A lot of plaster work. So like Sarah mentioned, the first thing that we had to do was get the roof repaired because there was a significant amount of water damage inside. So the water damage was really evident in a lot of the plaster.
These are just some during. And then that brings us to today. This is the exterior today. As Jeff mentioned, we painted it kind of a dark gray. That was probably one of the hardest decisions we made when we realized we couldn't have original unpainted brick, but we love how it turned out. And then this is today. I really only put this one slide in of current photos of the house. We have so many more on our website and our social media if you're curious about all the other rooms, but we are thrilled with how it turned out. You know, it was a long process of figuring out, you know, we didn't want to compromise the architecture, of course, and there's just so many beautiful things that just really needed some TLC and
yeah, I mean, Sarah mentioned that we tried to utilize the rooms to their original purpose as best as we could. So like she mentioned, the dining room, you know, we utilized it as the dining room. We made a couple, the third photo, a couple modifications to it in order to make it kind of serve our business, but really kind of keeping that same charm and same use, you know, was important to us.
Yeah, and you can see the first photo, we just stripped the white paint off the original doors. So you have the exposed walnut, which is so lovely. And then the second photo, like we mentioned, we replaced the iron railing with wood, and we think it turned out amazing. And then that last photo is actually the honeymoon suite, which has basically like a lounge area and this giant bathroom. That is the best bathroom ever.
Yeah, so we just wanted to briefly kind of showcase the new floor plans. So, you know, this is the basement where the warming kitchen used to be. We originally stubbed it out as a place for a kind of speakeasy bar. Right now it is currently serving as a lounge area. You know, I think that's probably going to be phase 2 when we'll do the bar downstairs. We will be doing a bar upstairs in the parlor area. And then
this is the first floor. And like I mentioned on the original floor plans, is the front 4 rooms were literally, they haven't changed. We're using them as they're originally served. And then the back part of the house, you know, on the left is what has changed quite a bit in layout over the years. So we made 2 first floor suites, you can see on the bottom left. And then we have our guest services reception area, and then we did put in a commercial kitchen.
Yeah, and one of the challenges of renovating an old home like this, obviously, and kind of bringing it up to not only up to code of the commercial use that we were going to do, but also making sure that we were keeping the integrity of the house, of a house that's historically registered, you know, nationally, locally. You know, Preservation NC has covenants on the house, which I believe Myrick is going to speak about in just a little bit. But yeah, so, you know, we were able to work with a lot of these agencies to make sure that the renovations that we were doing were maintaining the character of the house and the integrity of the historical nature of the house. But, you know, doing things like adding an HVAC unit to or system to a house that has never had HVAC is quite a challenge, but, you know, it was something that we were able to navigate nicely.
And then last is the second floor. So we did, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but we did actually add a small addition on the second floor, which is this part. We didn't really extend the footprint of the house except for the floor, the stair tower on the back. But yeah, we added 4 new rooms. It was kind of one of the main reasons we wanted to rezone. You know, we could have been a bed and breakfast as is, but we could only have had 5 rooms and we couldn't have done events. So we really wanted to have a couple more rooms, be able to do small, medium-sized events. And it was, so the square footage of the house when we got it was around 7,000 square feet. And then after renovations, plus the 4-room addition and the stair tower, we're closer to 10,000 square feet now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just showed we had to add a new hallway to join the new addition with the historic part of the house. So that's how you can access it on the second floor. And then just lastly, we have an entire acre. The house sits pretty far back on the property, as you can see. So we have a ton of space in the front for events and just gardens, and we have a fire pit now. And it's kind of one of the reasons that a lot of people even in our community didn't really know about the house because it was overgrown and it sits far back. So, we didn't take down a significant amount of trees. There were a few that were unhealthy, but we added a lot too, and just trimmed things back. There's really beautiful old magnolias that we trimmed back so you can see the house a little better as you're passing by. And that's it. You can follow along and obviously come visit us, have a staycation if you're local. You can have an event with us. Hopefully, eventually we'll have our parlor open to the public. We were hoping to open for drinks to the public a few weeks ago, but we postponed it. But follow us on Instagram. You can see all of our photos. And yeah, thank you.
Stop sharing. Oh, sorry.
I'll take it from here. Myra Howard with Preservation North Carolina. Great job, great presentation. Love what y'all have done with the house. And our involvement with Montfort Hall actually dates back more than 10 years, actually a good deal more than 10 years. The previous owner's daughter, the Chadwick's daughter, wanted to sell the house, but wanted to be comfortable to make sure that her parents' legacy with that house was protected. And she kept kind of half step forward, half step back in terms of trying to decide what to do. And we were able to persuade her to put a preservation easement on the property. Jeff mentioned easements and covenants. They're sort of interchangeable as a technical difference that doesn't matter in this context at all. But the easement basically calls for no demolition, no alterations, no additions, no subdivision without prior written approval. So in this process, we were involved in approving the addition at the back. We were involved in some other matters. And this easement lasts in perpetuity. I mean, will the building last in perpetuity? I don't know. I don't have to worry but so much about that. But it is for the long haul. It is a permanent set of restrictions. And the easements can be as strict or as flexible as the donor of the easement wants them to be. So in working with the daughter of the Chadwicks, we went through a number of drafts to try to get it to a point where she was comfortable with it. And we were comfortable that the house could evolve. I mean, we think it's important that, that changes get made to houses that are, that can make them more work, make them more useful, but at the same time protect them. And it is worth noting that we did have people inquire about buying Montfort Hall whose intention was to do 4 building lots. You do your math on this, 4 building lots on one of the highest parcels at the edge of downtown Raleigh. You figured that was going to happen, and that's part of why the previous owner put the easement on it. The house could have been torn down with a 1-year demolition delay from the city. As I'm sure Jeff and Sarah will completely agree with, getting your permits in a year is lucky sometimes. We do have covenants on the barracks in Tarboro, the sister house, and the covenants there were very helpful when there was a significant fire in the back of the property, or the back of the house. The good news is the front part of the house, where most of the detail is, had smoke damage, etc., but the real damage was at the back. And by having the covenants on there, it made it a lot easier to deal with the insurance companies, etc. And we reacquired the property and sold it to the current owners who are working on it. Interestingly, small world, the Cavanisses, who put the addition on the front of Montfort Hall, we had our office in their house on Hillsborough Street across from Fulham Memorial Baptist Church. They moved from Montfort Hall to that house when they built it in 1916, And there are a number of interior features of that house that are very similar to the features of Montfort Hall, even though it's like 60, 70 years later. They clearly loved some of the aspects of Montfort Hall. So when they're building their new house, I always kind of joke that Dr. Cavness wanted a more modern house. He got the exterior. Mrs. Cavness wanted the more traditional house. She got the interior. So a little bit of a schizophrenic house and a wonderful house. We put covenants on that one when after we had our offices there. And fairly recently, maybe 5 years ago, we had a developer come to us and say they wanted to buy the property, do a 5-story hotel or 5-story apartments on the property. And where could they move the house? And we were kind of like, you can't move the house. The house stays. And then a few months later came back and said, well, how about let me just at least remove the garage? And it's like, no, that's why we have these restrictions on that house. It recently sold. The most recent owner did a great job of respectfully using and maintaining it. It's in great shape. And the new buyers will be using it for law offices. And they signed a legal document acknowledging our covenants. And then just with one more little thing, my own house in Cameron Park, one back house, when I put it on the market, the first day it was on the market, got a phone call asking if the house that's just been fully renovated using tax credits could be torn down for somebody else to build their dream house on. These covenants matter. They really do matter. And we've seen this with some other situations in Raleigh where the private deed restrictions make a huge difference in preservation. It's the best tool out there. Love to talk to you folks that are watching this. If you're interested, if you have a historic house that you're concerned about your own home or your own office or whatever, and want to make sure it is permanently protected, we'd love to have a conversation with you. And with that, I'll again saying thank you, Sarah and Jeff, for what you've done today and what you've done for the last 5 years or whatever. And Julianne, we're so pleased to have you with Preservation North Carolina, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, there are a couple questions, but I have one that I want to ask you both first, which is obviously, I mean, looking at the pictures of the property before you started your renovation and everything, it looks like that could be very intimidating to take on that project. And I know you lived in the neighborhood for a while and walked by it. And I was curious, kind of a two-part question. Did you consider yourself preservationist when you took the property on? And how much of the history did you know about the property before you started getting involved?
Well, we had never done anything like this before, which is probably a good thing. We both are avid travelers and love history and tended to stay in places like this, like renovated historic homes. And so no, we had not been preservationists before this.
No, I think like one of the keys for us, I think, really was about being able to create a space for, people either locally or, from out of town to be able to come to Raleigh and stay and really feel like they're getting to experience like really all that Raleigh has to offer. Like, it's a historic building, so you can get, a sense of the architecture, and you can get a sense of the, kind of history of the property, the location. You can get a little bit of that information, but at the same time, you're also, just a little walk across a bridge over to downtown, and you've got, a handful of, local businesses that you can, become a patron of. And, really it ended up being what we thought a perfect representation of what Raleigh is. And we wanted to, kind of embrace that and continue it.
We didn't know, when I walked by it every day for so long. And I think I got my hands on the thesis even before, because you can find it online. So we did know a great deal about the house before we even undertook it. And then when we were in the due diligence periods, when we brought in all the experts, obviously we did not do this alone. You know, we had amazing architects and builders who then we brought in to be like, hey, are we crazy? Is this going to be worth it in the end? We want to save this house. So yeah, then we built our team.
Just a little aside, it's been interesting to watch how much more you can learn now through the internet from when you're doing historic research than you would ever have known. Bill Bushog we did not know what happened to William Percival. I mean, he just sort of disappears in thin air. And now we know that actually he went back to Virginia and back to Richmond, actually a little bit in trouble. There were liens against him for work that happened at New East and New West at Chapel Hill. And he skipped the state and died a rather sad death in Richmond. But the things that start kind of coming out when you start digging a little deeper on the internet now are fascinating.
We have a couple questions. The first one is from Cheryl Saba, who says, first she wants to just say, what a great job. I love your house. You guys did a great job on restoring it back to her glory. And she was also wondering if there were many surprises found during the renovations, and then a question about funding the project.
Well, I can speak to the surprises. I wouldn't say there were that many because the house has gone through so many changes throughout the years that, I mean, I guess I don't know what definition she has of surprises, but did we have any like?
No, I mean, like, so when the Jadwick family did their renovation in the late 70s, I imagine they probably found a lot of stuff because they were the first ones that were kind of peeling back what had been done, and everybody else had been kind of just adding to. And so I imagine they might have found some fun stuff. We actually did have a father and a son who love metal detecting. They have extensively surveyed the ground, and we found a lot of old coins, some old bullets and things. There was a time during the Civil War where it was actually occupied by Union soldiers. So there's some fun stories about, the soldiers, they turned the front porches into a barber shop and they were getting their haircut there. And we mentioned that there was the kitchen in the behind the house. They were actually there with their sabers skewering food off the plates as it was getting brought to the main house. So not sure how much of the food actually made it there, but that was actually one of the reasons that they believed that this house was remaining after the Civil War. Was because of the fact that they housed the Union soldiers there and they were, hospitable.
Funding.
Oh, and then funding. We were very fortunate that we were able to privately fund this. It is something that it would have been incredibly hard to be able to do it to the extent that we wanted to be able to do it into our vision without being able to do that. We did, or Sarah, I'm not going to take any of the credit for this. Sarah put together an extensive business plan. I helped look over it, but really that was kind of what made this project all make sense. Obviously, if you're getting any amount of funding from anywhere, you have to make sure that this is going to make sense from a financial standpoint. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to make it a business. A house this size and of this magnitude and of this, artisanal craftsmanship, it costs a lot of money to do and to do it right and
to upkeep it.
And so we felt like this business was the best way to do that going forward.
And y'all did use the tax credits, right?
Yes. Tax credits are a very, very valuable resource, both state and federal tax credits.
Yeah. And just for what it's worth, right now, if you're watching this thing, please call your member of the General Assembly, because this week we might have a chance to see the tax credits made permanent. In the House budget, the House is proposing making them permanent. The Senate bill just advances them for a couple of years. And And so they're in conference committee right now. So if you would pick up your phone or on the internet, you go to the legislative website and ask your legislator to make the historic rehabilitation tax credits permanent. We're halfway there with the House having already approved it. So I wasn't intending to go there, but might as well, right?
Another question from Kelly Cockrell is so stunning. I'm wondering what the maximum amount of people you could host for a wedding at Heights House. And I'm sure she's probably also wondering if you'll have the saber involved with serving food.
That is not.
I try and avoid anybody being able to handle super sharp objects.
Yeah, so we can do all kinds of events, not just weddings, but for weddings or any event, we can have technically up to 149 people. We are starting, we've only been open since May, and we've done a lot of smaller events and smaller weddings, and we kind of feel like that's more our fit, max around 100, but we love doing the small things too. But up to 149 is our maximum capacity. And that is mostly outside on our front lawn.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And the other questions were basically comments that were just saying, great job. There's one that I think you can see, a Boylan connection. And then another one, somebody who stayed at Heights House back in July and said that they loved everything. And one of our staff, Mary Francis, also stayed there recently and just raved on and on. So
yes,
yeah, thank you both so much for this presentation. Thank you for your stewardship of the property. It's a beautiful property, and yes, please go stay there if you're in Raleigh. And if you have any interest or questions about putting an easement or a covenant on your property, definitely reach out to Preservation North Carolina. And then, as Myrick said, please call your representatives today. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.